So my number one is The Talented Mr. Ripley from 1999, directed by Anthony Minghella, starring Matt Damon, Gwyneth Paltrow, Jude Law, Kate Blanchett, written by Anthony Minghella himself, but based on a Patricia Highsmith novel. So this is my number one because this movie sort of encapsulates the visual manifestation of summer. Its pleasures, its decadences, but also this feeling of not fitting in, and then the madness that can ensue with the heat and all the pressures and everything that you're feeling, which is sort of my experience with the summer. Like I've been hinting throughout this episode. And that's what this movie does. So, on one hand, you're in Europe, beautiful boats, amazing food, sweaty jazz clubs, those lazy mornings in your nice little European cottage or wherever you're living, and you're eating breakfast and you're wearing these summery clothes and you're, driving around Vespas. And I mean, what couldn't be more perfect than that? Like that is sort of my vision of summer. I hope I get to really do that, where I just take time off and just, I don't know, go to Italy or Bordeaux or somewhere in Europe and just spend time. So that's the fun side of it. But then the other side of it is this feeling of just not belonging, and I think there's something about the summer that heightens that, because your access to wealth and beauty and what kind of a summer bod you have or you don't have, it does change your experience in terms of how you feel about summer. And if you're not in that club, it can be a trying experience. And there are points in the movie, especially when Matt Damon first arrives in Europe and he's wearing his green swimsuit and he's totally pasty white and everybody makes fun of him and he sort of stands out. I'm not pasty white, but I empathize with that experience of just not fitting in, and then there's something about the summer experience that there will always be somebody on the outside. And I've often felt that, because this is a time that calls for, I don't know, a little bit more out of you in terms of having fun and putting yourself out there literally, but also in other ways. And I think that has a lot to do with access to money and wealth and upbringing. And so I think there's a little bit of that that's happening here, or a lot of that that's happening there, I should say. And then, what happens when these feelings of desperation coupled with the heat lead you to madness? And that's sort of what happens with Matt Damon's character, who's a very tragic person, who sort of gets it, but then blows it all away. And you feel for that. And I mean, I have not had that experience. I've not killed anybody, on a boat.
Neither have I. I want to say that too.
Right.
Yep.
Yet.
Right.
But have I had a weird encounter with somebody in the summer where I'm like, it's hot and humid and, it's like one of those off days and I've yelled at somebody, known or unknown? Yes, for sure. Not proud of it. Absolutely. But I think there's something about the summer that does bring out, not the nice pieces in me. So I think there's a little bit of that I see in this movie as well. But me aside, I think this movie is just a gorgeous treat of a movie. It's been in my repeat watch list for a while. I mean, we talk a lot about mise-en-scène. I think this is one of those movies where every department, from costume to set design to score to cinematography, it all comes together with A-list performers at their best. I think this is Matt Damon's best performance. Like, he's truly somebody else, and you sort of see the wheels turning. And I love those performances when you see actors in that, where they're shape-shifting, but not in an obvious way. And we'll get into that a little bit more. But yeah, you're truly transported. The movie drags a little bit in the third act, I will say. I think Kate Blanchett's character, who keeps popping in, I'm like, oh, of course, there you are again. There's a little bit of that always kind of gets on me, but in a teeny way. But otherwise, this movie, I didn't even mention Philip Seymour Hoffman, who's
so good in this.
Oh, amazing in this movie. Terrifying. And you need that sort of, adversary to your crazy lead. So that's so good. But yeah, ultimately, I think this movie is about pretense. Everybody's pretending, not just Ripley. Paltrow is pretending to be happy in this weird relationship she's in. Jude Law is everything but pretense,
Right.
and nothing else but pretense, I should
Mhm.
say. So is Kate Blanchett. So is everybody, right? So, and I think to bring it back to summer, that's what summer can be. It can be fun, but it can also be a big pretense where suddenly life stops. You're free from your obligations and commitments. And if you can afford it, you can pretend to be in sort of la la land and, be on your fancy boat and yacht and have a great time. I'm not knocking that. It's pretty great if you can do that.
Yeah.
But there is sort of this veneer of pretense which I think is on full display in the summer, because you get to go out and so does everybody. In other seasons you are pretending mostly indoors and only people who are with you can see that. I think the summertime it's out and loud, and that's what this movie ultimately comes down to. So yeah, that's my number one, Talented Mr. Ripley.
No, interesting. I think the themes and everything you talked about with pretense is definitely like one of the major topics this movie plays around with, and definitely a takeaway, that I have. I associate that for some reason more with a fall than a summer. But this movie does a great job of going through pretense and what the downsides of it, and then how really too, like Ripley's character as well, like he pushes people away because of the pretense that he has. I mean, he starts the movie, first he kills somebody who he loved but didn't love him back, which is tragic, but sad, obviously, because he's driven to kill. But then in the end of the movie, he's actually killing someone who did love him, but he's sort of forced to do that. So it really shows you that he, just to keep up the pretense, he's actually pushing away the one thing that he was craving through the entire movie, which is a real connection to a real person that he didn't have with the person that he murdered the first time. It wasn't reciprocated. And now here's this guy who does reciprocate his love in the way that he would want. But unfortunately now, because of this pretense and this lie that he has to build up throughout the entire film, that's the tragedy of this movie to me. Like, he has to then kill this guy as well, which is just really sad. And I think performances are great. Jude Law, I mean, this was his star making. I mean, between this and Gattaca, I mean, all of a sudden now it's like
breakout year. Like Jude Law was everywhere in that one couple of year period, to the point that I think he oversaturated.
He did, but it's due to, I mean, you see this and you're like, oh, I want to see more of this guy, and then you realize you don't. But this movie at least makes you excited about seeing a ton of Jude Law. So yeah, I think performances across the board are great. Even Paltrow, who sometimes I think's kind of weak in some films, I think she does a great job here. This had been a movie that I had really liked a lot as I saw it in theaters when it came out. So I'd seen it a bunch in high school and college. I haven't actually watched it in maybe like 20 years. So it was nice to kind of come back to it. In a weird way, it sort of wasn't as good as I remembered. It felt sort of like very late 90s to me. I can't really put a pin on exactly why, but it felt very dated in the way that it was handling the show. A big literary adaptation, a lot of stars, very I can't really articulate it very well, but I watched it like, oh yeah, this movie looks like a late 90s literary adaptation. So it wasn't as good as I remember, but it still is a great film, and the performance is still, especially Jude Law, still stands out. And that the one famous death scene in the beginning, I guess, or first act, it won't really spoil it for folks who haven't seen the movie, is still shocking, even though you know that it's coming. It's like, oh my God, like, I've seen it so many times, like I know what's going to happen, but it still is. And that's just the power, I think, of the performances, but also the filmmaking, that they can still lead you in a shocking death like that when you know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I get that about a literary adaptation. I think it's a very mood thing for me. Like, I like The English Patient, but I can't watch it.
That's another again, it feels like that type of, there's something that was going on in the late 90s.
Yeah, it's in that milieu, which I love the genre, actually.
Yeah.
Please bring these back, honestly, and actually go to those locations and film them, and not do a Ryan Reynolds green screen situation. Cannot stand anything and everything. But yeah, I think it's a bit of a mood thing. I think I have to be in the right mood to like watch a movie like this. There are times that I've watched this movie and I've sort of been like, oh, this is dragging a little bit. I'm a little bit bored and what have you. So I think there's a little bit of that. Also, the movie is quite long, So
it was long, actually. I was definitely feeling like the length a little bit, but I still enjoyed it. It just, I was surprised at how much it felt dated, I guess. I wasn't expecting that. And not in a bad way or a good way, just in a way that I'm like, okay, like you watch this and it makes you understand what was going on in film in the late 90s.
Yeah, because they don't make these movies
in
right
this way.
now.
They don't.
That's
Yeah,
why.
they really don't.
It's actually sad, you know, like was such a long time, and we've talked about this on this podcast. Like celebrated novels were the IP for a long time. That was happening in the 30s and 40s. Like people, it was an event. Who's going to be in the Gone with the Wind?
Exactly.
And blah, blah, blah. You know, now our IP is what we know what our IP is. So, I mean, I would be very excited if we kind of made some space for this IP as well, that because people actually don't read anymore. So I don't know if that's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could also be more towards like the dynamics of the business, in the sense of the reason why a lot of our IP are things like Marvel, DC, Star Wars, because the companies own that IP outright and they don't have to pay for the use of Superman. Well, that was a bad example. They kind of do for that estate a little bit, but you make an Iron Man movie, you're just making an Iron Man movie, no cost. You have to now adapt Da Vinci Code. You're paying Dan Brown a ton of money. So if I was a studio, you know what? Why are we adapting things that we don't own? And I think that is maybe one reason why we're seeing a lot less of that, because they have to pay up front for the rights of something. It's easier just to pull out of their vault something they already own to just save money, because it's all about the bean counters nowadays. But I do wish that it's some way this could come back in some form too, because I think it's an important genre for film. Hey there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through 3 of our favorite movies. Subscribe right now, or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.